Well, former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon's contempt of Congress trial is underway. He was charged with not complying with the January 6th committee subpoenas. But Watergate was the last time anyone found guilty of this crime, when Nixon-era counsel G. Gordon Liddy refused to answer questions before Congress. So what are the odds that Bannon is going to face the same fate? Let's ask the author of a brand new book, The Price of Principle, Harvard Law School professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, congratulations. If my math, well, not mine, the math that I was given is correct, this is number 50?
The 50th book. I'm trying to get to 75, but we'll see if the good Lord gives me the energy.
I just want to try to read 50 books. That's amazing. Congratulations. I want to get your reaction to this case, though, or this trial, because it's interesting. I mean, talk about 50. No one's been found guilty of this crime in almost 50 years. So is this them just targeting Bannon? Is it deserved? And how do you think this thing shakes out?
Well, it is targeting Bannon. What they should have done is gone to court first and tested his claim of privilege. If he lost the claim of privilege in front of the court, then the court could have issued an order for him to testify. But if Congress subpoenas somebody and the person has a claim of privilege, if they subpoenaed me, for example, to testify about my conversations with President Trump when I represented him, I could not comply with that subpoena. In my case, because I'm a lawyer, I would go to court and seek an injunction against this. But Bannon shouldn't be prosecuted for this. It's Alice in Wonderland justice. Prosecution first, and then the court makes a determination as to whether or not the privilege is valid. So I think he'll be convicted at trial. This is the District of Columbia, after all, with about 85% of people hating Trump. And I think it's very likely it will be reversed on appeal.
Okay, but let's go back to this idea of privilege. Bannon, was claiming that he didn't have to comply with the subpoena because of executive privilege. But I get the path that you're suggesting he could have or should have gone down. But the bottom line is he hadn't worked in the White House in over 30 years. President Trump had never invoked privilege. So I don't understand how that ever would have flown in any regard.
Well, it's a question of fact. I mean, he claims that the president wanted him to invoke privilege. The president didn't explicitly invoke privilege, but he didn't waive it. It's like the Navarro case where he was working in the White House. But let's assume that you got called. You used to work in the White House. You don't work in the White House anymore. But the president had called you in because of your brilliance in strategizing. There would be a plausible claim of executive privilege, even for a lay person who doesn't work in the White House. Enough for the court to have to resolve this. I'm not saying this is necessarily a winning issue, but it's an issue that should be decided first by the courts. Then Bannon would have the right to decide, should I engage in an act of civil disobedience, in which case he gets punished, or should I comply with the judicial order? He didn't have that opportunity. He was just required to comply with a subpoena without there being any judicial intervention.
So speaking of the January 6th committee, Congressman Adam Kinzinger said that he doesn't really have any interest of hearing Trump's side of the story. He does apparently want to hear Mike Pence's side of the story. In your book, you talk about the importance of due process. And I know this is a congressional committee. It's not a court of law. But is it important for Trump to have the ability to have his say, to give his side of the story? Or is it because it's a congressional committee, it really doesn't matter in the same way it would in a court of law?
But it's not a real congressional committee. As you know, every congressional committee that we remember, even the McCarthy committees, had people on the other side who could cross-examine. This is not a real committee. This is a kangaroo committee. It only has opponents of Donald Trump and all of his advisors. Look, I'm not a fan of what President Trump did on January 6th or of what happened after that. But due process for me, but not for thee, isn't justified. And therefore, I don't think that the January 6th committee's report will have the kind of credibility that the 9/11 Commission report, for example, had. You know, the Warren Commission, too. Woody Allen still talks about one day we'll hear the non-fiction version of the Warren Commission, but we haven't seen that yet. And I think we're going to hear about this as the non-fiction version, ultimately, of the January 6th. Right now, we have the fiction version, one side, done for television.
So, you know, I mentioned at the outset, this is your 50th book. What are you sharing in this book that you haven't been able to in the last 49?
Well, very different, because this talks about how I have been dealt with as the result of sticking to principle, how libraries where I live won't let me speak, won't carry my books, how community centers have banned me. And I just have to write about this, not for me, not for my sake, but for the sake of the First Amendment and the sake of viewers. I have to go now because I have my own podcast, but thank you so much for having me on.
You bet. Congratulations, Professor.
Take care.